Hello, I'm Jamie.
Hello, I'm Mark, and it's time for another episode of Through the Garden Gate. And gentlemen, boys and girls, and everything in between, good evening. It's Tuesday night, it's 7:30, it's time for another episode of
Through the Garden Gate.
Let's get Jamie in.
Hello.
You in Wales?
Yep.
How's
Nice.
the weather been down there? Over there.
It's been it was really it was chucking it down earlier, and it was all right on Monday. It was chucking it down yesterday, and it's been chucking it down a bit today.
We've all had lots of rain.
Well, it's supposed to be better tomorrow, so we might be going to the beach.
Oh, that'd be nice.
We've been in the arcade today, and guess what George won on the grabber?
Sausage Teddy.
No, I see it. You just put it behind me, didn't you? Oh, I see it.
Oh, ta-da!
Oh,
So,
what's that? Oh, a plum. Oh, hold on. So I looked at Steph's stories earlier, and she said she called it a sausage Teddy or something.
a soft teddy, maybe? A squashy teddy?
I think it said sausage.
Probably auto-corrected.
Unless it's my dyslexia playing up. Your camera looks really fuzzy, Mark.
Does it? It's probably the Wi-Fi.
No, I mean, like it's smeared or something.
Jamie.
No, George is the sausage.
Apart our farm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, there's sheep. They walk across the road and they come, they kind of come right up to the fence.
Oh wow.
Sheep and a baby lamb.
Yeah.
Just outside our cottage.
Very nice.
And horses and stuff.
And 2 horses.
Yeah, 2 horses.
Don't talk to me about horses.
Hmm.
Why? What have they done now?
I got a phone call at work. Teresa rang, said, "Can you come home?" Kate, her mate, Kate, has fell off one of our horses and it's bolted across the fields.
Gosh.
Took us hours to find it. I was driving around all these fields, all the back roads, trying to find it, trying to trace the hoof prints across the tracks. Oh,
Did you find it?
yeah, we got it back. Yeah.
Oh, good. Where was it?
It was 2 villages away.
2 villages.
It had to run a long way.
Fast, can't they?
I remember when we were little, we were in one of the fields, and about all of them came running towards us.
They did when we were walking through the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, George has got a gardening fact which is related to what's going on with the weather.
George's gardening fact.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you want me to show?
This bit, yeah.
This bit?
Yeah.
Right.
24,000.
24,000 litres of water could be collected from an average UK roof per year, which is enough to fill 200 litre water but and 150 times.
That is good.
That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water.
Isn't it like what we did when we were at home last week?
I thought that sounds quite familiar to me.
Yeah.
I'm sure we said about that last week.
No, last week's was about how much water you need to do your veg garden.
Oh, right. So, and that was 20,000 litres, wasn't it? Something silly?
It was 1,000 litres of water per hour when using a hose pipe.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, Jamie. It was like a 4.5-hour journey, something like that.
To get to Wales, wasn't it?
Yeah, a long way. Wales is a long way from everywhere.
Yeah.
Like Norfolk. We're completely opposite sides of the country.
At least it's not as bad as Scotland, because Scotland's about...
Scotland's even further away.
Yeah, it's like 8 hours.
Further away, yeah.
It's like 8 hours, Dad.
So there's no point asking what you've done in the garden this week.
Nothing.
The upside is that I got this, though.
Very good. Very good.
for the week. and the weather is doing our job whilst we're not there because it's being watered without us.
And also, if it tomorrow, Grandma and Grandad will probably go and
Give it a water
give it a water
in the polytunnel for us.
and everywhere else.
Yep. Right, bath time. See you later. Say bye to everyone.
Right, we'll see you next week back at home then.
See you, George.
Bye, George.
Bye-bye.
Can you see me?
Can you see me? See
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Is it working?
Yeah.
I can't see myself.
What?
I've just popped out because Mark message said, "How do I get in?" And so I popped out.
Now you can't
Now
see yourself.
I can't see myself. Yes, I'm back.
See you.
And I've just sent Mark a link as well, so he should be coming into the room at any second. He's in there now. Hi, Mark. Yeah, so garden-wise, I've planted all my tomatoes out, inside and out. All my chilies are in, all my aubergines are in, my cucumbers are all in. Everything.
Fly.
Really good now. Really good.
Just do it some good. Get it watered in nicely for you.
I tell you what has troubled me a bit. My loofahs, as soon as I've potted them on, they've just gone
They're so dramatic, aren't they, loofahs?
unbelievable. One of them's completely dead, and two of them have just gone all. Oh. So annoying.
Yeah.
They were doing really, really well, and now they've just gone. Well, no thanks. See ya.
Yeah, the one you gave me, I've planted in the polytunnel, and it's sort of sulking a bit. It's not completely dead, but yeah, it's not happy.
No, I just. What do you do? Direct sow them in the polytunnel and leave them?
Yeah, I guess so. It's always a struggle when you get the seed germinated, then trying to get that germinated seed to do something.
Yeah,
that's what I've always struggled with doing. It usually just sulks and sits there for weeks.
They need to be warm to germinate, so trying to sow something direct in the polytunnel in March, there's no warmth.
And you need the long season to get them going. So it's just like
exactly. So how do you do it? How do people do it? I don't know.
Maybe so.
Or just
massive
something in a big pot, yeah, and then just move the pot. Maybe that'll be next year. But I definitely don't think I'm going to get loofahs off these. They're absolutely rubbish now. They're about 1.5 foot long, but that's it. They're all wrinkled up and had it. Never mind.
Another year, another failed loofah.
Not going to try again. Maybe our guest could tell us how to grow a good loofah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He should, with his years of experience.
Yeah, we'll ask him. We'll chuck that at him, his first question.
So, should we get him in? So, tonight's guest is a garden designer, a TV presenter, a writer, a broadcaster, a trustee for Gardening with Disabilities Trust. He is the gardening expert on BBC Morning Live and has appeared on Gardener's World many times. And now, through the garden gate, it is Mark Lane. Let's get him in.
Oh, hang on a minute. There we go.
Good
evening.
Good evening, guys. How are we?
Yeah, very good. What about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a little bit damp here and a bit nippy, but apart from that, it's all right.
Yeah, you're the only one outside. We're normally outside, but we've wimped in today.
Well, I thought, get away from the dogs and everything. So, yeah, I've come outside.
I know what you mean, definitely. Did you hear what I was just talking about a minute ago, loofahs?
Yeah, I've no idea. I've never grown them.
No. I wouldn't bother trying. I think it must be my 4th year now, and it just doesn't happen. Every year something, they're so fancy little things.
But you still want to give it a try, though.
Exactly. But that's the thing, yeah. So they fail and fail and fail, and you should go and buy another packet of seeds next year. I really thought they were going to happen. They were brilliant, weren't they, Mark? They were absolutely brilliant. My seedlings were fantastic, really, really good. And then that's it, gone. Potted them on, and they've just no chance.
Never mind. Never
Never
mind.
mind, never mind. This time next year, we'll all have loofahs.
Or not.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, that's the thing. How are you then? How have you been busy?
Yeah, very busy. Very, very busy. You know, it's that time of year, isn't it, really? But
Yeah,
yeah, it's been good so far, so I shouldn't complain. Keeps me busy, keeps me off the streets.
yeah, I bet. Yeah. So I think probably we should start right at the beginning. I know we've got your amazing book, which I've read twice, to talk about, but let's have a little bit of chat about you and how it all began, shall we?
Yeah, why not? Go for it.
So, like most people, like me, and lots of other people, is the first gardening memories is with your parents, or out in the garden and picking a flower. What about yours?
It was primarily with my grandparents. So I used to remember following my granddad around with a little blue truck. And on my blue truck, I had a plump pair of scissors, a ball of string, normally 2 or 3 packets of seeds. Um, and he taught me everything about, how to care for the soil, which was really unusual in the 1970s when they were, pesticides and insecticides absolutely
Yeah.
everywhere. So, he taught me about caring for the soil. He showed me how to sow seeds, how to tie in plants. And then my grandmother, she was a flower arranger. So she taught me how to put shape, color, form, scent together, which has stuck with me today for my garden design work. Um, and then on my mother's side, their garden was just full of roses. And I have got this love-hate relationship with them now because of that. And all I remember as a kid was having to go out there and squish all the green fly and pick up all the grotty leaves. So, and all we wanted to do was go out there and play. But I grew up actually in an apartment in Hove. We were very lucky in the sense that we had the sea on one side and the South Downs on the other. And we had a very small communal garden, and we used to have the gardeners come in, and they used to sort of mow the lawn and cut the hedges, and that was about it. But there were these sort of circular beds, and there were probably about half a dozen, and all they had in them was a single rose right in the center. And I remember saying to my mum one day, could we go down and maybe plant something? Now, of course, this was before garden centres were around, so we popped along to our local, I think it was our fruit and veg store, people that we used to go to, and they had some plants there, and we planted some out. I can't remember what they were. But we loved it. And literally by the end of the year, every single apartment, there was only 8 of us, we each had our own little bed. And we used to go out there, we used to chat with a cup of tea. And I used to love it because, one day I was out there talking to an octogenarian and what they did during the war.
Oh, wow.
And the next day I was talking to someone who was growing rhubarb and how to make the perfect crumble. And it's just those lovely childhood memories that you have. And yeah, they've stuck with me and they're never going to go away.
No, wow, sounds amazing. Just quickly going back to your granddad teaching about soil.
Mm,
That generation, so generation above us,
yeah,
there's still, there's lots of them around here, around our way, and whenever I see them, they still talk about using chemicals,
yeah.
loads. That must have been so ingrained. So it's quite strange that your granddad was the other way.
I know. No, it was I mean, obviously at the time I didn't really know about it, but
No,
absolutely. I mean, yeah, he was very much about making his own compost, about making his own leaf mold, caring for the soil in a way that was even to the point, actually, that my grandma I remember she used to always want to go out there with all the scraps, from the kitchen, etc. My granddad, before they even got to the compost bin, he would be inspecting what was in that rubbish bin from the kitchen to make sure there was nothing in there that would harm his soil or harm his plants.
wow.
So yeah, he was really into it. I mean, it's quite astonishing, really, but good on him. And he had this lovely vegetable patch right at the end of the garden. And yeah, he used to grow some incredible veg and fruit, and we used to eat it and absolutely love it.
That's the thing. We now know why he grew lovely veg and fruit, because he made that beautiful compost himself.
Exactly. I know, and it is, it's one of those sort of miraculous things. And I remember, again being very, very small, and my granddad sort of taking me along the different bays, and almost sticking my nose into the last bay, and having a good old sniff of this wonderful sort of crumbly mix that, of course, he
Yeah.
would then add back into the garden.
That must be amazing for a child to see, that you can, if there's a few bays, you can see all the veg peelings on the top and things, and you walk down to at the end, that is going to turn into that. Yeah, to see that must be brilliant for a kid.
Yeah, and also, to pick out all the worms and
Yeah.
have a play with them, and
Yeah.
all the beetles as well. I used to love doing that as well. So yeah, it was a lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't forget those memories, and I don't think I ever will.
No, I bet you can't. So did he double dig, or was he a no
He
digger?
he he did double dig. He double digged, especially in the vegetable bit, but not in the fruit bit. Yeah, he did. He used to spend hours upon hours out there. I think it was just his excuse to get away from my nan, I think.
Exactly.
I think that's all it was.
Yeah.
And he used to smoke a pipe, and he used to always go off to his little potting shed and have a smoke of his pipe. And he always had a flask of tea as well. I remember that.
Fantastic. I can picture it now. Absolutely brilliant.
Mm.
What an amazing thing.
Yeah, absolutely lovely.
Yeah, yeah. Oh wow. So we're up to the round beds and filling up with plants and the roads in the middle. So what happened after that then?
So what happened after that? Sort of life happened, I suppose, and then went off to university in London, and didn't do any gardening or anything like that, of course. Apart from, I do tell a lie, we did. I shared a house in Golders Green, and it had a garden, but the grass was sort of like 6 foot tall. It was absolutely ridiculous. But we decided one year that we were going to grow some tomatoes, so we did clear the patio area. And we bought a few grow bags, and we got some tomato seeds that we grew in the house. And then we planted them outside, and we did actually have our first harvest, which was amazing. And that was
Mm.
my gardening experience, I've got to admit, during my sort of late teens and early 20s. And then I went into publishing, and again, sort of gardening fell by the wayside. And then it wasn't until I met my other half 30 years ago that we bought our first house. It had a garden, and that was it. I was completely and utterly hooked, and absolutely loved it. And like everybody, made mistakes. We decided we would put a beautiful lawn in, but decided to go with bowling green turf. And of course, bowling green turf needs a lot of work. And so, yeah, no one was allowed to walk on it. But it looked amazing. It looked absolutely incredible. But yeah, we loved it, and that was a lovely small sort of garden in London. And the previous owner used to have ducks in the garden, so the soil was actually really rich.
Oh, wow.
I know. So it was cool. So ever since then, that's it. Each time we've moved, the garden has got bigger.
Brilliant. Did you have bowling green turf in the next garden?
No, definitely not.
Oh, so you
Definitely not.
didn't study gardening at all, or horticulture at all at uni or anything like that?
Not
That all
initially.
came later on.
No. So
No.
initially, I did history of art at UCL, and then went into publishing. But I actually went into medical publishing.
Wow.
So I know, bizarrely, and I became the editor for obstetrics and gynecology, psychiatry, neurosurgery, and neurology.
Cool.
And it got to the point when I was actually correcting some what do you call them? Not scientists, basically people that were doing fertilization of eggs. But I was correcting their texts, and I got to that point where I was like, hang on a minute, I shouldn't be doing this. I've got no no idea really what I'm sort of talking about. But there I am correcting their text and thinking to myself, maybe I need to do something different. So I then fortunately, I was headhunted and I became the managing editor for Thames and Hudson, who were the arts publishers. So that sort of came full circle to my degree. And then I was also the publishing director for the Royal Institute of British Architects, which was great because during that time, obviously it was about architecture, but at the same time, landscape architecture. And I used to have these incredible discussions with landscape architects about how the house relates to the garden or the landscape. And of course, that's exactly what I do now. And then, of course, the car accident happened, and that meant I had to rethink my career and retrain. So I did, and haven't looked back since then.
Wow, brilliant. So when was that?
That was the year 2000. That's when that all happened. So my life changed in the year 2000. Had to. I mean, my publishing house were incredible. They kept my job open for me, but I decided that there was no way I wanted to travel up to London every single day anymore. And fortunately, if I can say fortunately, whilst I was in hospital having my rehabilitation, there was a horticultural therapist. And she got me outside planting bulbs and seeds and nurturing those plants. And, to coin a little phrase, a seed was sown. And she said, go off and do something with it, Mark. So I did. I was fortunate, when I was publishing books on gardening as well as art and photography and everything else. So I dealt with the likes of Christopher Lloyd, which was, amazing thing to do, and loads of other gardeners. And it was just, it was an incredible experience. And of course, through that, I was also learning.
It was all
fantastic.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm like a little plant, really. I'm just like osmosis. All these things just suddenly go into me. Yeah.
I didn't even know there was anything such like a horticultural therapy. I didn't.
Yeah.
Never even heard of that, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's a lot of the work that we do with quite a few of the charities that I'm an ambassador for. So social and therapeutic horticulture. And it's quite, it's astonishing stuff in the sense that, when I was in hospital and she got me outside, obviously I was focused on getting my hands dirty, planting those bulbs or whatever it was that I was doing. But she was constantly looking at me, watching how I was breathing, whether I was sitting comfortably, whether I was repositioning myself every few minutes. She just kept, I suppose, putting me at ease, making sure that my breathing was slowed down, my heart rate was slow. And I've got to say, for those 20 odd minutes or so that I used to be out there every day, I forgot about the pain, the depression and everything else that was going on. It's a powerful thing, social and therapeutic horticulture. And if anyone, God forbid, has to have it, but, it's a great thing to have if you do have it. It is astonishing how it works, and we know now, obviously, the science behind it all.
Yeah, definitely. I've said it before a couple of podcasts, but so back in end of December, I had quite major heart surgery. So I was, I was laid up for quite a while and couldn't really literally do anything. But when I could get back out into the allotment and kneel down and get my hands into the soil, it was just like a light switch had been flicked on. It's crazy.
Yeah. I know it is, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I eventually got home after a year in hospital, and we had to sort of, at the time we were living in a property that had three levels, and we had to swap the whole house around, and we put the bedroom downstairs, and it was lucky in the sense that there were some French patio doors that went out to the garden, so I could see the garden. But it was funny when I got home. I didn't want to go outside, but it was my husband who said, "No, come on, Mark, let's get out there. Let's get you out into the sunshine." And I did. And again, for those sort of initial 10 minutes of just sitting in the sun and feeling the breeze on my skin and the warmth on my face, I'd forgotten about absolutely everything. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the next stage was getting my hands dirty again. And of course, that rush of serotonin, that makes us all feel good. So, yeah, it is the power of gardening at the end of the day.
Yeah, it really is. It's unbelievable. You hear about it, it actually happened. You hear about everybody talking about it. But you're kind of skeptical sometimes. But when it actually happens, it is actually. I get tingles now thinking about it.
Yeah,
I could
me too.
literally feel it. I could feel it when I was sitting, kneeling down there, and digging away, or just scrapping around in the soil. It was brilliant.
I totally agree. And I mean, even now, even today, even when I'm weeding, that horrible job that we all have to do,
Mm.
it's like an act of mindfulness for me. My mind just completely wanders. And before I know it, I've forgotten all the worries and the troubles of the day.
Yeah,
And 3 hours have gone.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say, it's funny actually. I always say to people, because of the serotonin release, I say that, if you're out there gardening and you eat a bar of chocolate at the same time, you're going to get this
Oh.
double hit of serotonin. But just don't mix the two up, and you don't really
Right.
want to be eating your soil.
Oh yeah. But you can just lose hours, can't you?
Oh,
Just forget
easily,
what it just
so
floats
easily.
away. The time disappears when you're doing something you love, and it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Now I understand why my grandpa was out there so often and for such a long
Yeah.
time.
So now you're back out into the garden and you're loving it. What's going on then?
Uh, I did my RHS qualifications, and then I
Wow.
decided. Well, my other half said to me, "Look, you've got this sort of arty design background. Why don't you put the two together?" Um, and I thought, "Ooh, that sounds intriguing." So I thought, "Yeah, why not?" Went and did my research, looking at all the different sort of colleges, etc. And at the time, I've got to be truthfully honest, was absolutely disgusted at their lack of disabled access.
Oh, I bet.
Um, and I even had a few of the instructors say to me, well, how are you going to dig a hole? How are you going to do a site survey? And of course, that's like a red rag to me. So,
Uh,
um,
You watch
you
me.
know, exactly. Yeah, I know how to
mm,
dig a hole. I can dig a hole. If it's a really large hole, I'll get someone else to do it. And of course, with measuring something, I can do that now with different spirit levels and everything else that go on, and take measures that can just read at a distance. So, there's always, as I always say to people, there's always a solution and always a way out of something. So, yeah. So I then decided that I would do an open learning course because then I could do it in my own time,
yeah.
wherever I wanted. So I did a KLC garden design course, and loved every minute of it. And that was it. And then, of course, went out, begged, groveling, everything I could to friends and family to say, can I design your garden, to try and build up my portfolio. The company just took off. And at the time, we were living down south, down in Kent. And we were very lucky that people wanted their gardens done. And from then, I suppose, I started writing for the magazines, and very much from sort of the disabled access point of view.
Yeah.
And it was just by pure chance that one of the articles that went into Gardeners World magazine was picked up by one of the researchers from the TV and said, would you be interested if we come down and send a director down with a cameraman? And first of all, I thought someone was taking the
Yeah.
Michael. And I didn't believe them until it got to the point where they said, let's get something in the diary. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is true. Anyway, this lovely director came down, did my sort of 10 minutes to camera, and I thought that was it. I didn't think anything else of it. And then literally 2 days later, I had a phone call from the exec producer at Gardener's World and the RHS show saying, would I go and present at Chelsea?
Wow.
So in at the deep end. And of course, I
Just
couldn't
a
say
bit.
no, could I?
No
I had to say yes.
way.
And so I said yes. So that was the beginning of the TV career, the writing career, and the garden design work carried on in the background. So, yeah, it's been a whistle stop tour, I suppose, of everything. But I love it because every day is completely different, and I meet some incredible people.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely brilliant. So unlucky in one way, but then that's brought you to what you've got now.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't.
No.
I actually think, in a strange way, my life is probably better now than it would have been if I was still walking and not disabled.
Yeah.
For me, I was very lucky. There was the light at the end of the tunnel, and I know it's not that way for everybody. But yeah, gardening was my lifesaver.
Mm, brilliant. Excellent. So I've I've not noticed. I've obviously done a little bit of research, and so this book that we're going to be chatting about in a few minutes, it's not your first book, is it?
No, it's not. It's my second book, and my third one comes out next year.
Oh, wow. Do you want to tell us a little about your first book first?
So the first book was on the royal gardens of the world. It was quite bizarre, actually, how it came about. I'd always had this idea that I wanted. We love traveling, and of course, wherever we used to go, we used to always go off to see all these sort of public and private gardens that we could get into. And I'd always thought it'd be lovely to write a book one day of some, that contains some of that information. And of course, when I was at Thames and Hudson, we would do these incredible coffee table books, very highly illustrated. And I thought, yeah, that's the sort of book I really want to write. And I approached a publisher, which was Kyle Burks, who published the book, with my idea. And initially they said no, but they wanted me to do a book on raised beds. And I said, yeah, I could write a book on raised beds, but I'm not very excited by growing stuff in raised beds. But I could do it if you wanted me to. And then the publisher went off to the sales team and said, well, we got this idea for a raised bed. And they were like, oh, really? Do we really want to do one of those? And then she said, well, Mark has come up with this other idea. And of course, the sales team could suddenly think, oh, we could maybe get an Italian edition, a German edition, etc. So that's how it all came about. And it was difficult in the sense that I had to, obviously because of page length, restrict myself on the number of royal gardens. But we ended up with 21. It's an odd number because we did get the German and Italian editions, and we had to do extra of those gardens from those countries. But it was fascinating. But the actual, I suppose, the most interesting point from my point of view was, and also the most awkward part, which was trying to arrange for me to go and visit all of these places and be accessible and talk to the head gardeners, the growers, the conservationists, etc. Well, I got to 19 of them, not all 21. And it was a brilliant experience, an amazing experience, and it was a great thing to write. And yeah, I want to say thank you to everybody who reads it, because it still sells very, very well. And who knows, there might be a Royal Gardens of the World 2 at some point, but I think that'll have to wait for a few years.
Wow,
TV
traveling
series.
around all those different royal gardens must have been amazing.
It was astonishing, and also just, I mean, obviously, and I wanted to define what the royal garden was as well, in the sense that, when we think about them, we always think of sort of like these very large estates, 17th, 18th century, like Versailles, or etc. But actually, a royal garden can also be something like Highgrove, because that's a very private garden. And then the one from Bali, which was Tertaganga, which is this private water garden. And then, of course, there's Royal Botanic Gardens as well, so Kew's in there. So I wanted to sort of show that, but I got absolutely fascinated by the whole conservation side of it all. And also archaeobotanical work, where they're sort of, digging up layers of the soil to find out what was sold or grown in particular periods of time. And yeah, absolutely fascinating, and loved every minute of that as well.
Brilliant. I'm gonna have to get that one. Right,
It must be like time capsules.
I'm really going to be very unprofessional. I'm just going to run into the kitchen because my copy of your book is there, and I'm going to go. Unless you got yours there, Mark.
I
Oh, that's
haven't got
right.
mine with me actually. No, I
No, the
haven't.
other Mark has. That'll do. There's one. There it is. So there is
So,
your new book, which I have. I keep saying read, listened to twice. I'm dyslexic, so I don't read very well. So I listen to everything. I put it on. There's an app that you can scan it all, and it reads it to you. I
oh,
think
good.
it's
That's clever.
absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great fun to research, I've got to admit. But yeah, it was a good book to write.
What? How did you come up with the idea for that?
I didn't actually. The publisher reached out to me, so it's part of the Futures series, and there's things like the future of Egyptology, the future of the novel, very very sort of random topics. But I suppose what interested me a lot was the fact that it was a short book, which is always handy, especially because I was writing this other book that comes out, and I've always been fascinated about technology. I'm a big sci-fi buff as
Mm,
well, and it's just seeing how technology sort of has been introduced into gardening so far sort of made me want to know a little bit more as to where's this technology come from, and of course where's it going to go in the future. And yeah, it was a great one to write, and again, thankfully the publisher was very happy with it. So and it was nice in the sense that they said it could be a sort of a bit of a personal little thesis as well. So there's a little bit about my story in there as well. And I also tried to tie that in with the future, with regards to the fact, when I was learning garden design and everything, we didn't have all of these apps and everything that are available now, and
yeah,
mobile phones, etc., didn't exist when I was a kid. So yeah, and the more I learned, and especially when it got to space exploration, the more I learned about that, then the more fascinated I
yeah,
became.
yeah. See, people think, "Oh, gardens of the future" and all that, but even now, every day we are using technology for our gardens. I look at the weather app every day to see about waterings, and every single day.
Yeah, exactly. And apps have really changed the landscape, really, and have made it, a lot more accessible for people as well. We all forget that, those smart speakers that so many people have in their houses now, and, are a lifeblood for disabled people in particular, but for anyone, because you can just ask it any question and it will give
Yeah,
you the information. Of course, there is that I know, and I mention this in the book, there is that worry, I suppose, of the sense of that information that is given, is it correct?
mm,
But I'm of an age where I remember when the internet first came
yeah.
about, and
Me
everybody,
too.
when it first came out, everyone was very skeptical. They were concerned about security and about the correct dissemination of information. And it's exactly the same now with AI. We're seeing exactly that same sort of effect now. And I think that you've got to, I mean, we've got to embrace technology because it's going to be here and it's going to, run at its fast pace that it does run at. Um, and we just need to learn how to use it in a way that, you know, makes us be able to choose. And that's the important thing. At the end of the day, we have that right to choose whether or not we want to use the technology in our gardens. But
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I've got smart irrigation system here in my greenhouse. I've got sensors in plants. And that's only going to get more and more mainstream. And it helps us out in everyday gardening.
yeah, definitely. Just going back to whether you believe what um, the internet gives you. I think I do believe. Normally, in a search, I always believe it because I think there's so much out there now that it's pulling it from so many different places. But when I go to use a plant identification app, I always do it at the app and a Google lens as well, just to see if they and sometimes they don't both match. So that's the only time that I question it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I think, you're absolutely right. I mean, when the internet first started, there weren't as many resources, I suppose, out there that, the internet could go and find. And of course, at the end of the day, AI is really just going out there with these little bots trying to find all this information and give it to you in real time. But yeah, I think, there is a lot of correct information now, I would say.
Yeah.
But of course, there's still some very bizarre things that are said about particular things. And it comes down to that choice word again. It's whether or not you do accept it or you want to just find out a little bit more and see if that information is correct. Because at the end of the day, with gardening in particular, we're dealing with living things and we don't want to follow some instruction that's then going to kill our plant. We want to make sure that it's going to be the right information.
Exactly. Yeah. I've
It's the
got
same as
sorry, Mark, go on.
It's the same as anything, though, isn't it? You all, if you're researching anything, you'd always do two sources to see if those two sources have similar answers. You wouldn't just go from one source and go, yes, that's the right answer. You'd always go and get a couple of opinions and see whether they're, sort of close.
Exactly. And I think, you've got to, because, so much information is out there. And as long as you're right, Mark, as long as you know that there are two completely separate pieces of information that are giving you similar or exactly the same step by step or whatever it might be instruction, and it's probably going to be right. But there's always still that worry, I suppose, that there could be something bizarre that you think, oh yeah, that sounds right, I'll deal with that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And of course, AI, as it gets better, it's going to learn more, it's going to adapt. And I suppose there's that worry, I suppose, that, and I mentioned this in the book, is it going to be like a Terminator movie where Skynet's going to take over the world and start killing all the human race? Who knows? I mean, who knows if that's going to happen? I would like to think there's probably some fail safes in the code somewhere that would be able to stop it. But yeah, I mean, but in a way that excites me also, knowing that AI is going to be able to learn and come up with solutions. But I suppose for me, it's more about the real-time application of being able to give that information immediately. And of course, as technologies advance, it's not necessarily going to always be in front of a phone screen or in front of a computer screen. Who knows where it will be? It might be that we all wear these little specs, or we might have a little chip, somewhere in our body, and it comes through our eyelids. I don't know. Who knows what it'll be? Probably
possibly.
I won't see that in my lifetime, but it might be. You never know.
It's amazing how quickly it changes, though. I mean, you just think about in your own lifetime how much things have changed. I mean, you wouldn't have even had a video call.
No, I mean, that's the alarming rate. Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mark. I mean, that is the alarming thing at the pace at which it is going now. And in a way, we can't keep up with it, because as soon as something comes out, it's already obsolete. So yeah, it's just about sort of, I suppose, doing whatever you want to do and just using this technology that can assist you in the best to make life easier for you and for when you're out in the garden.
Does AI worry you in a garden design way? I'll tell you for why, because I tried the other day, I knew you were coming on, and I went on to Chat GPT and said, design me a dry garden with a path and a blah, 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 blah. And that in 30 seconds, it popped up with a little picture of a garden design.
Yeah, it is a worry. It is a worry. And obviously, at the end of the day, everybody has a budget, no matter what they're doing in their garden. So if you know that you can get a design for free via AI, then, why not go and do it? I suppose my only argument to that would be in the sense that garden design isn't just about designing, it's also getting to know the client. And no matter how much you talk to ChatGPT or whichever AI system you want to use, you know, it's not going to understand those nuances. And a lot of the time when I'm designing gardens for clients, when we have those initial discussions, it's often what they don't say that tell me a lot about the type of space that they want.
All right.
And and of course AI won't be able to pick up on that. Um, and yes, of course, it can probably come up with this design a lot quicker than I probably would if I was sitting at my computer coming up with the design. But then there's that, I suppose, that personal creative element as well by, using a human to do it. But it's not to say that, I would still probably think that I might use AI. If, say, for example, I'm doing a dry step garden in the middle of Sussex, let's say. I might put into a search thing just to say, give me 20 plants that would survive in East Sussex for a dry step garden.
Yeah.
See what it comes up with. So I think, again, using it from that assistant point of view, but yeah, it is a concern, but I still think that people like that one-on-one interaction, and they still like that human element when it comes to creating a space, which of course you're going to live with hopefully for many years.
Yeah. I suppose when you're visiting the clients, with their old garden and you're walking around looking at everything, you can get an idea of maybe what they've put in just from having a look.
Absolutely, and also what their interior decor is like as well.
Oh, wow.
So that can also give you an indication of the type of people that they are. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, often you go in and they want everything taken out and start from scratch. But often you get gardeners where they want to keep certain parts of the garden, but they want to just make it better.
Yeah.
And you can only do that by actually really taking note of the type of soil, taking note of, the aspect, seeing what's growing there already, taking all those ideas that the client may or may not have, and building this complete picture that then creates, this magical garden that they can use.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, some of the other things in the book that you were talking about, um, irrigation systems and things like that. I was thinking, oh yeah, irrigation system. I thought, oh, hold on, I've got one. I've got one in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
greenhouse. It's a small solar panel, and it detects when it's hot and it waters it more, and when it's colder it waters less. But it's about 80 quid, sitting
yeah.
there, and it's brilliant. But you just don't really. It is literally everywhere.
It is. It is everywhere. I mean, robotic mowers as well.
Yeah.
As I highlight in the book, it's interesting how a lot of the tech for gardening stuff has come from the agricultural field. So, of course, with agriculture, it's very much about sort of growing produce and growing the most produce and using land wisely in the sense of not having any wastage of any land. So what we started to see in agriculture were these sort of very large combine harvesters that become these data hubs, because it's literally taking all the information that it's needed to feed back to the farmer so they can make all the right decisions. And of course, a lot of the time now, AI is making those decisions for the farmer. And of course, we're now seeing that in our gardens with these robotic mowers, and we're starting to see it with all of these sensors that are with irrigation and with soil and nutrients. So it's interesting to see, and I think the next phases that we're starting to see in agriculture now are things like what they call bee vectoring, which is where commercial bees are being bred to pollinate particular plants so that they can maximize the produce, which obviously can feed the world. And then, you don't have to go a million miles to sort of think, well, actually, you could see that happening in our domestic gardens where particular bees will be bred in order to pollinate particular plants so that they'll continue to grow. So, it's a fascinating field. It really is a fascinating field. And I just think the more we see I think really we're only at the moment on the precipice. There's so much more information and so much more technology to come. But of course, at the moment, our brains can only think about certain things because they're the only things that people have come up with so far.
Yeah.
You've got a robot mower at work, Mark, haven't you? It's been a game
I've
changer for you.
had one for it's probably about a year now at work, and it does half the lawn area at work. So it's a 7 acre garden, so it does half of the lawns, which has saved me about a day and a half of mowing.
Yeah.
And I can control that from 160 miles away. It's crazy.
It is, isn't it? It is crazy. But would you say, Mark, that's made life easier for you then? Or would you say that, it's taken away that pleasure of sitting on a mower going around doing the grass?
I know it's definitely saved me. It was probably one of my least favourite jobs. I mean, I prefer weeding to mowing the lawn, if I'm honest.
That's interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah, yeah. I can see that. I can see that. I mean, I do enjoy weeding, I've got to say. But yeah, I mean, and I think, as we start to understand these technologies and we do realize that I wouldn't say it's necessarily going to free up time for us, but I think, it's definitely going to make life that little bit easier, which means it frees us up to do other things that we could possibly get on and do. Then I think that's a great thing. Yeah, I mean, I would just love to be able to be frozen and then sort of come back in 200 years and see where it's got to, because I think it would be incredible to see.
Wow, that would be unbelievable.
Or scary.
It would. Or scary, yeah. Either way, either way.
Yeah, but just look how if you go back 200 years now, nothing. We
electric.
had absolutely nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. But the scary thing is, in my lifetime, so in the last sort of 50 plus years, technology has flown by, absolutely flown by. And yeah, I mean, I know the next stage is Mars and beyond, but where else is it going to take us? And as I say, we can only think about those technologies that our brains can think about at the moment, but who knows what it will be like in 20, 50 years time.
Exactly. You keep thinking, oh, they can't do anything more. We've got everything now.
Yeah.
And then, boom, they bring something else out. Take these little phones we're looking at now, more power in them than the first rocket that went to the moon.
No, and as you say, you can do so much now with an app and stuff on your phone that you would never been able to have done, especially when I was a kid anyway. And our life is on our phone now. And we couldn't live our lives without them.
No, definitely not. And just going to when we went to Chelsea last week, walking through London, and everybody is looking at the phone as they're walking. Everybody. It's just or on the train or on the underground or walking down the street. Everybody is like that.
I know. It's quite sad, isn't it? I mean,
it is sad in one way.
I mean, obviously, with my sort of architecture head on, I find that really sad because there's so many wonders to see when you're walking around London, or anywhere for that matter.
Yeah.
And of course, also there's that whole issue of, walking into someone because you're so fixated on your screen. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It is life. It's the world now that we live. It's a bit like, as we mentioned earlier about AI, when phones first came out, who would ever thought we'd be having a conversation like this on a phone?
No,
I thought that would be something that we'd only see on Star Trek or something.
I was only saying to my wife and a friend earlier about when we were kids and you wanted to go on the telephone, you had to go and sit in the hall because you only had one telephone point, and your dad just shouting at you, "Get off that phone! It costs so much."
Yeah, and the telephone directory by the side of it.
Yeah. I can remember before we had the telephone in the house, we had to go to the telephone box, and my nan and granddad would call the telephone box on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, that's true. That's true as well. Yeah, and black and white TV.
Yeah, I can just remember those. Yeah, ridiculous,
scary,
absolutely ridiculous. It is really, really scary. Yeah. So
But excited.
back to the book. Tell us a bit more about the book. So there's
Uh,
so many different
there,
subjects
there are so
from
many different topics in
from
there. I mean,
tractors to space to everything, like you said.
yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a big element is about climate change
Yeah.
and us being resilient and adaptable gardeners. And again, we know that with genetically modified food, there was rightly so as well. A whole load of debate about whether it's a good or a bad thing. But now scientists have started to they're able to now make tiny changes to the mini chromosomes of plants. So not actually changing the genetic makeup of plants, but they can change the mini chromosomes of plants, which means that a lot of our beloved plants, which would probably, wither or die because of all the drought and because of the wetter winters, they might be able to put a trait in so these lovely plants will continue to grow.
Mm.
And that's already happening again in the agricultural field, where they're starting to do it with maize and soya. So it won't be long before we'll start seeing that coming down into our domestic gardens. Um, and then I suppose we as caretakers, we are caretakers of the land. We have to be responsible for it. But we do know that climate is a big game changer, and we are having to make these changes. And we, as I always say to people, we are actually at the front line, when it comes to gardening, because we can see the changes that these hotter, drier summers are having on our plants or on the soil. With plants flowering at the wrong time, etc.
Mm.
And the effects that also has on our native flora and fauna. So we've got to take note of it, and we've also got to be more sustainable and more eco-driven as well when it comes to the materials that we choose as well, that we use in our gardens on a day-to-day basis, and also especially from my garden design business when we're designing gardens. So much so that now a lot of the time we don't even we try to take out as minimal amount of waste as we possibly can, and we reuse the waste in the garden where we can. And I suppose then that next step, especially in the book, is going into space, and what that's going to involve. And it's not just about growing stuff in space. And yes, work has been done on the International Space Station to see how plants do grow in zero gravity. And you've got to remember that plants grow by gravitropism, so the roots go down and the tips go up. But of course, in space, there isn't any of that.
No.
So they have to create these special sort of growing module things that they put the plants into, so they can grow the plant. And they've been successful. So they've been successful with quick crops, so things like lettuces and radishes. But it's not just about the fact that they've done that. It's also that sort of next step of when we do go off into space to the far-flung reaches, especially to Mars. So there's sort of a multi-reason why we're doing it. There's that feeding the astronauts on their journey so that they've got some fresh produce. There's also the fact that when they get to wherever they're going, they've got something that they can grow. But there's also that whole process of actually sowing a seed, nurturing the seed, growing it on, feeding it, etc. It connects them back to Earth because it's something we do here on Earth. And that's going to be really important, especially when they're away for years, and they're going to have to deal with living in space. So, it's a fascinating thing, and even the little rovers on Mars have grown some seeds on there inside a little glass sphere. But of course, you've got to remember that, there's no abundance of water on Mars. The soil is very, very poor. There's really high ultraviolet light. There's lots of radiation. So if you were to grow plants outside, they would just wither and die very, very quickly. So of course, it's going to have to come down to some kind of biosphere or something that they grow them in. But I find that absolutely, mind blowing to think that you can do that. And there's so much work being done now here on Earth to try and replicate sort of the Martian landscape to try and see what can be grown. And they're also now looking at the moon surface, so what's known as regolith, which is that sort of grey, whitey, sort of sandy stuff that you see when you will see the pictures of the moon, which again is very low in nutrients, but they're learning and seeing how they can grow stuff in regolith to see if they can then start introducing farm crops on the moon.
Wow.
Bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. But lovely.
And I suppose if they did start to grow lots of stuff, it would produce oxygen as well.
Exactly that. Exactly. I mean, obviously, it depends. It would have to be done on a vast scale. But initially, as I said, they're going to have to do it all in these sort of closed loop systems. So, they use human waste, all the poop, etc. They'll use as manure. Urine will be turned into water that they can then water the plants, etc. But once they're able to sort of change, and they might have to do it sort of with non-plants initially to try and change the atmosphere, but then once they do introduce plants outside, then in theory there's no reason why they can't terraform or start terraforming different landscapes.
And I suppose another big change in technology is LED lighting. This last 10 years, it's only been that much. It's become really popular and easy to get. That would really, to go to space, they couldn't take massive big grow lights like we used to have years ago.
No. Exactly. So could you imagine trying to do that? I mean, LED lights is a brilliant example. It just shows you again how technology has completely changed our lives. And you've only got to look around your house, everything's LED now. And I remember again when LEDs first came out and the emission of light was terrible. But now, it's astonishing. Even, solar lights, we go to that extreme with solar lights. Sort of 10 years ago, solar lights were diabolical.
Awful.
But they've got so much better. And it's only going to get better as well as the batteries get better and the technology inside them gets any better. So, and of course, solar panels are getting smaller, they're becoming, more productive. So it means less reliance on electricity and on gas. And who knows where that's going to go, because we're already seeing them, appearing on more roofs at home. Soon, it'd be lovely to see I know they said every new house would have them all on, but they don't have them all on. I mean, again, solar panels when I was a kid, didn't even thought that would be possible.
No, it's amazing to see a solar panel. The only time it was on a calculator.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think I'm an electrician by trade, and I think it's from next year, I'm sure it is, every new build's going to have solar panels on.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, even
definitely.
They've come such a long way. I mean, we used to have solar panels where we used to live in Kent, and we've just had them put on our new place here in Lincolnshire, and our electricity bills just plummeted, absolutely plummeted. And it's astonishing to think that these things on your roof are doing all this work for you. And I mean, we try and be as green as we possibly can. So we've also got an air source heat pump here, so we use that as well to heat the house. And of course, then we collect our own rainwater, and all the other sort of things that go on. And as a nation, but also worldwide, we're all having to do this because of this changing climate.
Definitely. I think we're so far behind though, because it's probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, myself and wife went to Germany on holiday, and the solar panels there are just absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, we
And
are behind. And
their climate's not much different to
no,
ours.
no, I know. I think, we have been slow at adopting it all, and I think it's a shame. And I think, when it all first came out, it was ridiculously expensive. But of course, as it's become a little bit more mainstream, the prices have come down. They're still, don't get me wrong, it's still not cheap to do. But at the end of the day, if you can think long term and think of the amount it's going to save you in the long term, then it makes so much more sense. But yeah, I think it's a real shame actually that the building industry haven't fully got behind it all, because I remember when I was in architectural publishing and they were talking about all of this way back then, and that was the late 90s. So yeah, it's in a way that hasn't really come on as fast as everything else has.
No, it's really slow.
Yeah,
I think it's going to pick up though.
I think it will. I think it will, and I hope it will, because I think people will really start to see the benefits.
So I'm presuming you went to Chelsea last week.
You know what? I didn't. For first time in many, many, many years, I was unable to go because of other commitments, and I feel awful because of it. And it was meant to be a really good show. So you'll have to tell me, was it a good show?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic.
Good.
Really, really good.
Good. It looked good. What I caught on the TV looked very good. So yeah, I sort of kicked myself that I wasn't able to be there. But needs must. You have to do other things sometimes.
And there was, and I can't remember the name of the garden or the designer, but there was
Garden
a
of the Future.
Yep,
Yep, the
Garden of the
garden.
Future.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, with Josh and Matt, who were the gardeners and designers. Yeah,
that's right.
a brilliant garden. Because they were highlighting more about the scientific advancements, especially with regards to crops. So things like the fact that we can now grow chickpeas here, as one example. But and also their sorry, just a bird caught my attention at the corner of my eye. And then also sort of like, I think there was a toilet or something that was completely self-regulating or something. I don't know. Didn't quite understand it. And it's brilliant to highlight it, because we do need to address all of these issues, and we need to open that sort of conversation. And of course, having a show garden at Chelsea is a great way to start making people think about these things and to bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I think I did like that garden, but my favourite one was the glass house, the first one as you come to. Joe's one.
Joe Thompson's. Yeah.
Really
I heard that
nice.
was meant to be beautiful. Yeah.
Really good.
And again, the message behind it and where it's going, that scheme of rehabilitating women prisoners so that they've got a job when they get out of prison is such a brilliant thing.
Well, that's such an important thing now with RHS gardens, show gardens, is the fact that, this second life, because, go back sort of even just 5 years ago, that wasn't always the case. But I think it's brilliant now that the show gardens should have a second life, because it's important. These aren't cheap gardens to build. And if they can really make a difference within the community afterwards, then all the betterment for it, really.
Definitely. I was looking at some of your posts earlier on your Instagram, and there was one where somebody had mentioned about being in a wheelchair and trying to get round Chelsea.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? What do you think about that?
It's interesting, isn't it? Well, it's like any event, really. It's not always the easiest things to get around. The thing that really is my bugbear, I suppose, at Chelsea is they put in all of those metal walkways.
Yeah.
And of course, where the metal walkways go in, they then put in these incredibly steep tarmac ramps. So if you're pushing someone in a manual wheelchair, for example, I mean, I'm fine on my powered chair, but if I was in my manual chair, or if you're pushing someone in a manual chair, those ramps are not easy to maneuver.
No.
Also, there's that whole thing about the fact that everybody, especially when it's extremely busy, you're doing the Chelsea shuffle, literally shuffling behind each other. And if you're in a wheelchair, it's not easy because you can't always see.
No.
There have been talks in the past about having sort of designated spots by gardens where disabled people can sort of wheel themselves into or go themselves into, which I think is a great idea. My other bugbear, I think, a lot of the time is actually, and lots of people say this, you actually see the garden, you see more of the gardens on TV than you do when you actually go and see them, because you're only seeing them from a particular angle. Because a lot of the time, the gardens are in a dip, or there's something blocking a view, and you can't always see around, especially at my height. You can't always see down, or you can't always see around something. So I've mentioned in the past to the RHS, if you know that a garden's going to be like that, why don't you somehow erect sort of reflective mirrors or something above, so you can look up and so you can see the whole of the garden. There's also that whole thing, for people who are visually impaired or have sight loss. It would be marvelous, wouldn't it, if every single garden had an audio tour done by the garden designer and the landscaper who were involved with each garden. It all went on one RHS app, and people could just download it, and then they could listen as they went round.
Amazing.
Wouldn't that be it's an easy thing to do, really, but it would be life-changing for so many people. So yeah, they're not the most easily accessible, but I think with the particulars of the site that they have, at Chelsea, at Hampton Court, etc., I still think they do an incredible job. It's just like anything, especially when you're disabled in a wheelchair, you always have to assess where you're going, plan your routes, make sure that there's solid ground underfoot and all that sort of stuff before you even head out the front door, really. And as long as you've done that sort of homework, then hopefully your day is going to be an enjoyable one.
Yeah. It's hard enough to see the garden when you're walking, let alone trying to
Yes.
fight through in a wheelchair. There's a few times last week when you could see people pushing a wheelchair and they're just literally standing there waiting for people to move, and nobody moves. So I kind of like put my back to people so block them to let them get through. It's just must be so frustrating.
It is frustrating. The other knack is you just very, very gently catch the heels of the people in front of you. Because being British, what always happens is that person turns around and says, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry to you."
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're the one that caused it. So, it's a little trick there if anyone's listening.
Yeah, but Richard, that app would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Your app, have your
Wouldn't
earphones
it?
in or listen to it. Because it's a pain in the backside trying to see the garden, let alone trying to get to the information board to read about it as well.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
could
and
look
not
at,
everybody, looks. Yeah, not everybody goes, onto the internet and sees, to read all the blurb about the gardens, and it's not always, or not, they can't always put all of the information there. I just think it would be a fascinating thing to be able to do, and especially on something like press night, when the gardens are open and people can walk on some of them, to allow people who are visually impaired or have sight loss to come in and then experience the gardens and those spaces when the crowds aren't so many.
Yeah.
Or
Maybe
just do
they
an
could
evening.
just have have an afternoon or an evening for disabled people in
Well,
wheelchairs.
that was also one of my suggestions actually to the RHS, because I think they would be surprised at the number of people that would want to come on a particular time slot or a particular day or whatever it might be.
I bet there's so many people think, "Oh, I'd love to, but I'm not going to because it'd just be a nightmare."
Yeah, and that's the issue. And then I suppose there's also that thing about the fact you can see the gardens at the moment better on TV than in person. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But I'm sure there'll be a solution at some point.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Anyway.
Fingers crossed. So, is there any RHS designs on in the future
Yeah.
for you?
Well, I did the one 2 years ago, didn't I, at Hampton Court?
Right.
But no, not at the moment. We did actually apply for one. Was it last year or this year? I can't honestly remember. I don't know, whenever it was. But we actually got rejected. So we got through to the last 40 or whatever it was. But right at the last minute, we were pipped at the post. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because going forward, there isn't going to be Project Giving Back, who have funded quite a lot of the show gardens. So
Oh, wow.
it's going to be interesting because obviously, there was sort of before COVID in particular, but probably 10, maybe 15 years ago, funding for the Chelsea show gardens really plummeted. And that's also when the RHS lost the Telegraph as a sponsor, for example. And so they had to sort of rethink ways and come up with other ideas, which is where sort of the smaller garden concepts and the balcony garden concepts, which have been so well
Oh, yeah. I
received,
love balconies.
have really worked. But of course, they take a lot less money to build. But then Project Giving Back came in, sort of around about probably just before lockdown, if not just before that. As a philanthropic charity who give out money to designers and charities to create these garden spaces. And the other remit of it was also to expand the number of charities so that smaller charities could also get a look in. But they were only going for 5 or 6 years. And I think this last year, so the ones that we've just seen in Chelsea this year were the last lot that were going to be funded. So
Oh, right.
it'd be interesting to see from next year how that's going to go forward.
Yeah, because that's. But you saying that you got rejected. But why do they let so many of the designers do it again and again and again every year?
Well, it's a good question. It's a good
Yeah.
question. I suppose there's the for something like Project Giving Back in particular, I suppose, they know that they're probably guaranteed to get a silver gilt or a gold. So that's good kudos for them. I suppose there is that thing, from a TV point of view, from a PR point of view, again, having those names recurring. But you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a shame in a way because I've always said that you've got the likes of Hampton Court, etc., where you can still, you've got much more space. You can maybe create the same gardens for a fraction of the price because of the less logistics that you actually need to order to build something at Chelsea. And I've always said Chelsea should be something that should be looking sort of almost completely out of the box. So coming up with designs that are really, really pushing the boundaries with new designers coming through who have all these incredible ideas, because I think it would be a lovely, fresh way of looking at design for outdoor spaces. And of course, you don't get that if you keep getting recurring designers coming back. But, don't get me wrong, the recurring designers that do come back are still knocking out incredible
Well, of course.
gardens and they're
Yeah, they
still
are.
making us think. But, it's a shame to think also that, well, maybe, Joe or Josephine Blogs didn't get that, opportunity because of that recurring designer. I suppose it's a tricky balance, really.
Yeah, because I took my wife and she's not really bothered about gardening at all, but she's been for the last 4 years on the trot now, and she said it was getting a bit samey. So from her non-gardener's eye, walking down Main Avenue, she said a couple of them are going, "Oh, that's a bit like last year," type thing.
It's
So she's.
interesting. Yeah, because last year I would have said you could easily have taken out all of the pathways because all the gardens were very similar and they could have all merged into one.
Yeah.
And, again, I suppose it comes back to this whole idea of climate change and resilient planting and having to show these different types of planting that we now have to deal with. So because of that, garden designers are sort of following the same principles when it comes to plant choice and plant selection. And also you've got to remember that there is only a finite number of plants that are always going to be available in May, that are still going to look their best. And, of course, you're still going to get, someone growing, daffodils in May that should be in flower in February or something, because they can, because they're incredible growers and breeders. But you can't always do that on one of the show gardens. So yeah, it is. I mean, it is one of those things, I suppose, where it has become a bit samey, and I suppose again that's where things like the smaller gardens and the balcony gardens have sort of broken that up and jazzed it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know whether, because it's very interesting. The days have gone of sort of single mass plantings of a single plant and big sort of topiarized stuff. It's become much more free flowing and mimicking that natural landscape, which is so on trend.
Definitely.
I think
there was one.
Nigel was the only one that was really pushing the boundary, really the only one that looked completely different to any of the other gardens with the banks of sand.
Was that the Tom Massey one?
About that.
That was the Tom Massey one, wasn't it?
With the sand, with the dividers through the mounds of sand.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you see, because those dividers, similar concept was used in another garden about 2 or 3 years ago. But the designing, the planting, and the materials they chose were completely different. But yeah, I mean, that was, I suppose, you're right. From what I saw, that was really the only one that I suppose really stood out as completely different to the others.
Yeah. And that was the one that I liked the least. Just looked really, the planting looked really patchy. I suppose it was trying to get, in sand dunes or whatever. It's not, you don't have big, it's all spaced out, but it just looked too uniform.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, Jamie, because I remember having a chat with, I can't remember who it was, it might be Monty or someone, about 3 years ago or something, because there was one particular designer, I can't remember who it was, and their planting was very patchy. It was a very modern garden that they did, sort of quite hard landscaped, but the planting was quite patchy, so there was a lot of bare earth in between. And then next to it was a completely different garden, very, very natural in appearance and very densely planted. The one that had all the bare patches got a gold, but the one that looked more natural got a silver.
Wow.
But the build qualities were exactly the same. And this is where the whole point system always comes under, argument and disagreement. And what came back from the RHS was the fact that the the designer stipulated in their brief that their design style for planting was to show bare earth, whereas the other person didn't say that their design style for planting was mass planting without any earth showing. And because that initial designer had stipulated it in the brief, they got that extra point.
The brief.
It's all
crazy.
Comes back to the brief.
Is that the one where Monty spoke openly about it on the TV?
It may have been. May have been. I think he probably did speak about it. Yeah.
Yeah, he said he thought it was the wrong decision or something.
Yeah. I mean, that does happen sort of year on, year out. There's always 1 or 2 gardens where people think that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's tricky, isn't it? It's like anything. It's like if you go to a museum or an art gallery and you start looking at, paintings or whatever. Everybody has their own viewpoint of how something should look, how beautiful something is. So, it's not like, you can look at every single garden. I mean, you should, but you're looking at every single garden with different eyes. You can't always look at them with the same eyes because you're looking at things that are always different from the next garden. So it's tricky. I mean, I definitely wouldn't like to be a judge because I think it's a very tricky thing to do.
Yeah, really hard. I listened to a podcast, one of the RHS ones a couple of years back, and there was a judge on there trying to explain how they do it, and wow.
Yep.
So strict.
Yep. It is very, very strict. Very strict. But the last, if they're torn, by 1 point here or 1 point there. It does come to a final vote between the judges. So that's where you could argue, well, actually, is it because those judges like that designer, or is it because that they, you just don't know. You just don't know. So it's you've got to judge it on some basis, and that's where the numbering system comes in.
Yeah. Well, I love Chelsea. Yeah, I
So
really do
do
love
I.
it. But
So do I.
yeah, brilliant. I like all of them, to be honest. I really do. And
Yeah.
next year's at Sandringham, and that's 10 minutes down the road. Woohoo!
There you are. You see.
Brilliant.
Oh, I've got lovely
Right.
memories of Sandringham's because my grandparents used to live on the Sandringham estate.
Oh
So
wow!
we used to. I remember as a kid, we used to just go and run in the Sandringham estate through the bracken and all of that sort of stuff, and with the dogs. And I used to have whale of a time. Used to love it.
Yeah. Sandringham's lovely.
It
Absolutely
is
lovely place.
beautiful place. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, can't wait. Right, so Mark, it's that time of night where it's the other Mark has a few questions for you.
Go on then.
Lightning
Lightning
round.
round. Nice quick fire questions. So the first one to ease you in: your favourite band or artist?
It's an easy one. Oh God. See, I'm quite a poppy kind of person, so I would have to say somebody like this is going to sound awful, isn't it? I know something like ABBA, to be honest, for me.
If you like
Nothing
it,
wrong with ABBA.
There is.
great answer.
I know.
My wife's just been to the what's it called in London?
Oh,
They're all
oh,
holograms.
yeah, I wanted to
Voyage.
go then.
Voyage.
Yeah,
She says it's
I missed
absolutely
that.
amazing.
Everybody
It's still going.
said
Still
it was
on.
incredible.
Still
Is
on.
it still on? Oh, I'll have to see if I
Yeah.
can get tickets.
They've
I'll have to
extended
see if I
it.
can get tickets. Oh,
Right, next one. We're thinking about summer and what your choice of garden drink and where. So in the summer, are you a cuppa in the morning or a cold beverage in the evening kind of guy?
I'm definitely a cold beverage in the evening.
Nice, watching the sun go down.
What would
Yeah,
that beverage be?
probably either a beer or a shandy. I'm not a big drinker, but I do like a nice cold beer.
Nice.
Can't beat it.
Next one, flowers or edibles?
The best ones in summer.
Flowers or edibles?
I suppose for me, it's got to be soft fruit for edibles. So strawberries, blueberries, that ilk, and raspberries. I absolutely love them.
Can't beat it.
No, I do. I love those. But for ornamentals, I just love nice, simple, open cupped flowers. So things like echinacea or heleniums for me.
Good for the
Lovely.
pollinators.
Exactly.
Beach or forest?
Forest. I had to think about that one because I do like a beach, but definitely a forest.
Yeah, something calming about a forest.
Yeah, definitely.
In a text message, what would be your go-to emoji?
A love heart.
Yeah.
Any choice of colour?
Of the love heart or of
the love heart?
Red.
Red one. Nice and classic.
Exactly.
If you could only have one snack for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Probably apricots.
Oh
Nice.
wow! Dried ones or fresh ones?
Both. That doesn't bother me.
I love dried apricots. They're like wine gums, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Exactly. No, they are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Finish the sentence. My perfect day would be.
Alone in the middle of nowhere with my other half and the dogs.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Good choice.
But not
Today's
really alone, but you know what I mean. So
Nobody else.
Yeah.
Today's favourite plant?
Oh, I think it's probably the Chilean guave.
Oh, I'm growing one of those this year.
It's just that lovely sort of strawberry fizz. I love that taste of that strawberry fizz flavour of the fruit.
I look forward to trying it.
Mm.
Google that.
What's your favourite season?
Autumn.
Oh no.
Change. Ready for the rest.
Yeah. Also, because my birthday's in October, so that's probably why I love it.
If you could make one thing disappear from your garden or the gardening world, what would it be?
That's simple.
Yeah.
Mare's tail.
I'm with you on that one.
We are inundated with it here. I hate it.
I bet that would grow on Mars.
Probably would. Yeah, you're probably right. I know.
Next one's quite appropriate. Favourite weed?
Dandelion.
Dandelion.
Ooh,
yeah, beautiful plant.
Lovely, yeah.
Garden visit or plant shopping trip?
Probably when I did the Royal Gardens, there's Drottningholm in Sweden for me. It's an incredible royal garden, but it's kept immaculately. So yeah, probably there.
Brilliant. And then the final one, what would you want your gardening legacy to be?
Just to be remembered as someone who loved gardening and loved sharing my knowledge and skills, I suppose.
You've definitely done that.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we can get your book in any bookshop, Mark, or online?
Any bookshop, any online bookstore, it's available there. It's only priced $9.99. It's a good price. It's a lovely little good read, and as you said, Jamie, it is packed full of information, even though it's a small book.
Yeah, it is. Really is. Just put it closer to the lens, Mark, so we can read it. There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you so
I read
much.
it in 2 sittings.
Did you? The good thing about this app's called Speechify. You can speed it up a little bit if you want, so you can read it. You can read it really quick.
So it sounds like Minnie Mouse, does it?
No, not quite that far. Yeah, it's really good. Well, Mark, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, guys. It's been lovely.
Thanks.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Have a lovely
See you
evening.
later.
The rest of it. Cheers. Bye.
Bye, Mark.
Bye.
No, fantastic.
I'm just going to change locations.
George gone to bed.
Yeah. I was in the bedroom. I've now moved downstairs. It's very open plan, this place that we're staying. So
Is it?
let's grab something to lay my phone up against. There we go.
That was really good.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
Really good.
Like that.
As I expected it would be.
Yeah. Such an interesting man.
Yeah, and that book is, like I say, such great ideas and stuff of what the future may hold and how where we may be heading.
That's why I had to listen to it twice, because there's so much in there. You just, to try and get it in.
Yeah, there's a few bits that I actually, once you'd read it, I went back and read it again just to make sure it had sort of gone in, because there's a lot of big ideas in there.
Definitely.
But yeah, like a few people said, let's sort out the problems we've got in the planet before we go ruining any others.
Yeah. Yeah, and us normal people would say that, but the other people, the governments and God knows what don't, do they? Definitely not. But yeah, I enjoyed that.
Thanks everyone for watching.
What's that? Are you going to RHS Wentworth? Probably not. It's a long way.
It's close for me.
Whitworth is.
It's closer than Tatton.
Oh, it must be
In Yorkshire,
closer for me then. I thought it was further away than Tatton.
No, it's an hour and a half from mine, so it'd be 2 and a bit from yours.
2 3/4. Well, maybe then. Depends what I've got on. Yes, Jenny, leave well alone. But it's not going to be, is it? So I think we'll have to run with it.
Use the technology for good here as well. If they're going to try and mess up anywhere else.
Definitely. So what's Wales got ready for you for the rest of the week?
Depends on the weather.
Yeah.
There is a garden that I think we're going to go to on Friday. That's I think it's the highest altitude garden in Wales. It's at 1,000 feet. And that looked quite interesting, so I think we might pop there on Friday if the weather's good to us.
Nice.
And then maybe the beach tomorrow. Again, if the weather's nice. Just have to play it by ear.
Yeah.
Typically, after weeks and weeks of sunshine, it gets
I know,
but it's miserable.
I've seen it. We need it though. That's the thing.
We do.
Hopefully, our horse fields can start growing now.
Joe's off to Wales again in August. It is a lovely place. It's so different to England. You wouldn't think it would be being so close, but it's a lot calmer and a lot friendlier than the UK.
Yeah. Never been. Are you anywhere near John's?
I think I probably drove past John's on the way here.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Because it's like in the Snowdonia National Park, so he's on like the outer edge, isn't he? So.
Oh, is he right? I don't know where he is, to be honest.
Because he's near Shrewsbury, isn't he?
Yes.
So we drove like past Shrewsbury.
Half an hour from Shrewsbury.
Yeah. I don't know his exact location, but yeah, I think we probably drove past his little patch of haven.
Yeah. Right. We'll leave you to Wales then.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
And we'll see you next week for another fantastic guest.
We will. Yes, definitely. Right. Have a great week, mate.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Through the Garden Gate.